Oventus is a Brisbane-based medical device company founded in 2012 by myself. Listed 3 years ago, 2016. We work in the sleep apnea space. We have a proprietary technology for the treatment of obstructive sleep apnea, which we're bringing to market at the moment in Australia, Canada, and the US. So obstructive sleep apnea, for those that are unaware, is when you stop breathing during your sleep or slow down breathing. And those cessations in breathing lead to very low oxygen saturations at times, as well as disrupted sleep, which can then lead to long-term health issues such as hypertension, diabetes, obesity, depression, increased cardiovascular risk, as well as daytime somnolence. Health-wise, obviously very severe long-term issues with that, and in terms of the health economic impact, also huge direct and indirect healthcare costs, as well as cost to the economy in terms of lost productivity and increased workplace health and safety risk. Cost has been estimated at about $160 billion a year as a result of untreated sleep apnea in the market. Historically, the gold standard treatment has been CPAP, continuous positive air pressure. And continuous positive air pressure involves what is effectively a reverse phase vacuum cleaner and a fighter pilot mask. So the patient would strap a mask to their face, and positive air pressure is pumped in through the airways. And that's used to inflate the airway and to keep it open as the patient sleeps. The airway can collapse at a number of different sites, and often driven by nasal obstruction. The airway can then collapse at the soft palate, which is the boxing bag at the back of your throat. The sidewalls the airway can collapse in. The tongue can flop back, and the epiglottis can also prolapse and cause an obstruction. CPAP pumps air in to splint the airway to keep it open. CPAP, unfortunately, often causes nasal obstruction. And nasal obstruction is also the main reason why CPAP often doesn't work or isn't tolerated. And because of this, while we know CPAP works 100% of the time, it's not often well tolerated, and I'll get into the CPAP failure rate shortly. We also have oral appliances that work to bring the jaw forward, and in doing so also bring the tongue forward. The issue with that is that the tongue is the site of obstruction in only about 40% of cases. So while mouth guards are good, standard mouth guards that is, are good at dealing with just a tongue-based obstruction, the soft palate, lateral wall, and nasal obstruction are still problematic for mouth guards. The next layer of treatment, if we failed CPAP and to adhere to CPAP and an oral appliance hasn't been effective enough, then we get into the surgical territory. Nasal surgery, 22% success rate. Multi-level ENT surgery, about a 53% success rate. And that's usually the first level of surgery. In the second head-out surgery, we can break both jaws and bring them forward, and it has an 83% success rate. Obviously very invasive, high morbidity, high cost associated with that. And then as well as that, we can look at lifestyle modification factors, weight loss, sleep hygiene, so on and so forth. In my clinical history, I'm yet to meet the patient that treats their sleep apnea by losing weight, but it is theoretically possible. So if we look at where Oventus sits in that therapeutic spectrum, we have mouth guards, and this is our own randomised crossover study where we've had a device with and without an airway deployed. And we found that a standard MAD, just bringing the jaw forward, was successful in treating the sleep apnea in 56% of patients. When we added in our airway and our X-vent valve, that increased to 80%. So we have a very significant increase in success rate. We have other products in development that increase that success rate to 85 and 100%, but they won't be released to market until 2020. CPAP, as we said, it's 100% effective, but very rarely used, and therefore is not having a significant impact on disease management for the majority of patients. And in fact, Doug McAvoy and Ron Grunstein published the SAVE study, I think nearly 3 years ago now. And in that study, patients that were using CPAP, and the definition of a compliant CPAP user is someone that uses it 4 hours a night, 5 nights a week, so a very low bar. But even at that rate, patients struggled to comply, and the ones that are using it, that study found that they're only using it 3.5 hours a night, and it was having no effect on disease management. So that was a fairly interesting study. It was a long-term prospective study with large numbers, so very clinically and statistically relevant. So why don't patients use CPAP? It's discomfort, it's being tethered to a machine, it's having a mask strapped to your face, it's the pressure, being forced into your airways, causes airway dryness. Leaks from the mask wake up the patient and the bed partner. It's also the ongoing costs of maintenance and the lack of portability. And so, patients, while we know CPAP works, as I said, they really struggle to use it over a long period of time. The main anatomic reason patients will fail to adhere to CPAP, and also the main reason that patients fail to respond to oral appliance therapy or a standard mouth guard is nasal obstruction. So what happens is, we've found in our studies that 83% of patients are oral or oronasal breathers during the night, and about 79% suffer from nasal obstruction. What happens with nasal obstruction is if you put nasal CPAP on a patient, you're trying to pump air up through the nose, they can't get enough air, or it's incredibly uncomfortable, or both. And so what they do is they switch to mouth breathing. The minute they open their mouth, the pressure runs out the mouth and treatment fails. Those patients are then put on a full face mask. And the full face mask is particularly intrusive in that it'll now cover the nose and the mouth. And because of that, it requires much higher pressure. The higher pressure then leads to leaks, so the patient will tighten the straps to stop the leakage. That pushes the bottom jaw further back. That then requires more pressure again. We end up with more leaks, more pressure, more tightening. The patient ends up throwing the mask away and fails treatment. In oral appliance land, a patient with nasal obstruction, as they breathe through the nose, and nasal obstruction or congestion, it increases from standing to the laying down position, it decreases again on your side, and it increases as the night goes on. So the vast majority of patients, as we go through the night, usually around the 2 a.m. mark, will have a level of nasal obstruction that is such that the throat will send a message to the brain, because as they breathe in through a congested nose, the restricted flow leads to negative pressures building up, which sucks the airway shut. As those negative pressures build up, the brain gets sent a message saying oxygen levels are falling, breathing is becoming more difficult, and the brain says, switch to mouth breathing or you're going to die. When the patient switches to mouth breathing, the jaw falls back and the whole system fails again. So nasal obstruction is the reason for non-adherence to CPAP, but it's also the reason why oral appliances fail, because when the patient opens their mouth, the traction on the mandible is lost. Major problem in both CPAP and oral appliance therapy, and again, success rates for surgery are very low. So for myself and for my patients in around 2012, I decided that if we can't deal with the nasal obstruction, we should give the patients a second nose. And in effect, the platform technology that we have is a 3D printed airway that acts as a second nose. It runs from outside the mouth, between the teeth and the cheeks, and into the back of the throat. The first time I slept with this, I got my first good night's sleep in my whole life, actually. And I started delivering those devices to patients internally. At the time, I ran a national network of dental clinics, and without any regulatory burden in Australia, we started delivering them to patients. It was quite clunky though, and so we decided that if we wanted to launch this properly, we would need to form a company and invest some money into product development. The product we have here, the O2 Vent Optima, is now our flagship device. It's iteration 27.3. We think we've got it right now. We've had phenomenal feedback from clinicians and patients under controlled market release conditions, and we saw a 40% increase in sales in Australia when we introduced this, and it's just recently been launched in Canada as well. What the Optima does is that when nasal obstruction increases through the night, instead of switching to mouth breathing, the patient will switch to device breathing. So the air enters in the front of that airway. We call it the duckbill. It enters into the duckbill and it goes in an enclosed airway between the teeth, and the air exits at the back of that, and the back of the airway into the back of the throat. So when this happens, instead of switching to mouth breathing and the jaw falling back, the patient can continue to ventilate through that airway with a stable jaw position and an oral seal. All that happens is the air flows down at another level. And so what we've done is we've bypassed the nose and the soft palate. We've also shown which are the top two levels of obstruction. We've also shown that allowing that air to flow in through the airway has an identical effect as pumping it in with a CPAP. So the negative pressures that build up are reduced to atmospheric levels as this device acts as a pressure inlet valve. So when the switch to device breathing occurs, the negative pressures are normalized and breathing continues normally. And we've seen that across thousands of epochs. The airway alone led to a 20% increase in efficacy. So the number of residual events per hour reduced by 20% when we add the airway into an oral appliance. That increased the success rate by 20% and the response rate by 40%. The success definition is a 50% reduction in the number of events per hour, the number of times they stop breathing, to a level of less than 10 events per hour, and a response rate is a 50% reduction in disease severity. So the airway alone increased the success rate 20% and the response rate 40%. Subsequent to that, we developed what's called a positive end expiratory pressure valve. So what we have in the device just with the airway is we have a bypass of upper level obstructions. We neutralize pressure swings as we breathe in. With the X-vent valve, it adds resistance on exhalation. So we have low resistance in and we control breathing out. As we add resistance into the airway on exhalation, that leads to a pressure gradient building up within the device airway, and that pressure gradient is delivered back into the throat. So we have in effect back pressure. I guess it acts like a turbo injector on a diesel engine. We have some back pressure that improves stability of the airway, it inflates the airway. And PEEP, or positive end expiratory pressure, which is what the PEEP valve delivers, that's exactly what CPAP is designed to do. So instead of a machine pumping the air in, the patient's own breathing becomes the CPAP. We found in our clinical studies that when we add this one-way valve into the airway, it acts like a ratchet pump. It inflates the airway and it reduces the number of events a further 30%. So we get a 20% improvement in efficacy with the airway and another 30% improvement with the X-vent valve. That leads to success rates increasing from 55% for a standard oral appliance up to 80% for Optima and X-vent. We have in clinical trials and in development a dual level valve, which we call OnePAP or oronasal EPAP. It's oronasal expired positive air pressure. The OnePAP device actually led to a 50% reduction in residual events, and 70% of patients that had failed treatment became treatment successes, and that led to an overall success rate of 85%. The last part of our treatment platform is the O2 Vent Connect, and I'll show you some photos of these in a minute. And the O2 Vent Connect allows us, for those 15% of patients that still require positive airway support, they can now use CPAP without a mask at ultra low pressure, and they can breathe through the mouth without losing airway stability. So we've now dealt with all of the major problems with the current standard of care. We've turned a mouth guard into a virtual CPAP for 80% of patients, so they no longer need CPAP, and if they do need CPAP, they don't need a mask. They can breathe through their mouth if they want to, and it's at ultra low pressure. So here are the success rates. We've got in market in Australia and Canada at the moment, our O2 Vent Optima and X-vent. The Optima is FDA pending. We expect in the next 1 to 2 months to receive clearance for the Optima in the US market. We are signing material contracts with sleep facilities in the US ahead of launch of the product even. So we have an enormous amount of demand for this product in the US, which we're now converting to material contracts. And the first site was launched overnight, Monday night our time in Canada, and we'll be rolling out. We're aiming to do one site a week through the back end of this year. We then have X-vent as well in Canada. In the US, we're in discussions with the FDA on X-vent. We think late this year, early next year. Having said that, sleep physicians are adopting the technology so that when the time comes that X-vent is approved in the US, we'll have an installed base of Optimas to sell to. And they'll be sold on a subscription model online, shipped in the mail. So we should have some pent-up demand for X-vent as well. The US market for us is in excess of $2 billion opportunity. There are 30 million sleep apnea patients in the US. Only 6 million have been diagnosed, and at least 3 million of those patients are outside of care. The reason being, if you look at the way this operates at the sleep clinic level, if 100 patients are diagnosed with sleep apnea, 35 will refuse to even try CPAP out of hand. Out of the 65 that try it, around about 80% will show compliance at the 90-day mark. Now that's important because the DME distributor, the durable medical equipment distributor that sells CPAP, only gets paid if they can show that their patient is compliant at 90 days. So they work very hard to do that. Unfortunately, out of the 50 to 60% of patients that are compliant at 90 days, half of them are non-compliant at 1 year and 85% at 2 years. So as a result of the refusal to trial CPAP or the high abandonment rate, more than 3 million patients in the US are outside of care. We sell these devices at $600 a piece. Plus we have some service facilities as well that generate another $200 of revenue. So 3 million by that number is north of $2 billion in the US market alone. And that's just the patients that are outside of care. That doesn't include new diagnoses, of which there are over 1.5 million per annum. Our first material contract in the US with a sleep group actually diagnoses over 480,000 patients a year on the first agreement. Um, in market at the moment, in the therapeutic market, oral appliances are only 10% of the therapeutic market. The reason being is that there's a very complex patient journey. There's competing economic imperatives, and unfortunately, previously, oral appliances have not been efficacious enough to be recommended as a first line of treatment. Even on that basis, the oral appliance segment is set to grow to 26% of the therapeutic market because of the pent-up demand for patients that are outside of care not using CPAP. It just so happens that on the back of that, we also have the most effective oral appliance on the market, and one that actually has the ability to displace CPAP. So we feel we're very well positioned to take advantage of the trend in the market moving towards or away towards oral appliances and away from CPAP. And again, we have a micro CPAP within our device. So our downstream products, I did promise you to show you what they would look like. You can see on the left-hand side there we have XVent and Optima, which we can treat 80% of patients successfully with. If we switch out the XVent for one PAP, we get to 85%, and with Connect we can treat 100% of patients. And for each of these treatment options, we have significant clinical advantage over any competing technology. This is actually the only technology on the market that treats the entire airway. So we can manage nasal obstruction, soft palate collapse, lateral wall collapse, tongue-based collapse and epiglottis, all with a simple mouth guard and a positive end expiratory pressure valve. CPAP can manage all levels of obstruction, but does make nasal obstruction worse in many cases, and that leads to treatment failure. So we really do have a unique opportunity here to bring the millions of patients into care that are currently not being treated. You can see our success rates there climbing compared to a standard mouthguard in our own randomised crossover studies of 56%. We get to 63% when we put the airway in, and up to 80% with XVent. We think that's our sweet spot at the moment, and we have enormous demand from sleep physicians for Optima and XVent. One PAP still in development, and Connect, we think they'll be in market around 2020 for one PAP, and Connect is we're in out licensing discussions on that technology at the moment. We don't intend to bring that to market ourselves. But we can treat every patient more effectively than any other technology on the market. So, I did mention that oral appliances are only 10% of the market, and I alluded to the reasons for that. And the reasons are variable efficacy. So a sleep physician writing a prescription, if they know the success rate is probably 50-50, they're reluctant to write a prescription for an oral appliance as a first line of treatment. Because we now have efficacy close to CPAP, we're at 80% success rates compared to 83% for CPAP, so we're getting very close now. The sleep physicians say, well, look, if your success rates are so high, we'd prefer to use your technology first and then use CPAP later if we need it. And we agree wholeheartedly with them. But we still needed to find a way to give the sleep physicians access to our technology. Reason being is the complex patient journey. So traditionally, a patient would have to see their GP or their primary care physician, get a referral to a sleep physician. They would consult with the sleep physician. They'd then be recommended a home sleep test or an in-lab sleep test. They would undertake that test at home or in the lab. They would then come back for another consultation with the sleep physician. Now, they'd be referred to a DME distributor or a CPAP reseller for a CPAP trial. They'd either pass or fail at 90 days. And if they didn't fail at 90 days, they're very likely to fail at 1 or 2 years, and then they fall out of care. Out of desperation, those patients may start to Google for other treatment options. They may come across an oral appliance. They then need to go back to their sleep physician for another consultation to get a prescription for an oral appliance. At that point, the sleep physician doesn't have faith that the oral appliance will work and may or may not write the prescription. The patient then goes to the dentist to have the records taken. The device gets fitted at the dentist. The patient then needs to return to the sleep physician for another consultation. They'll be referred for another follow-up sleep test, and then the patient goes back to the sleep physician again. There are very few patients that are dedicated or tenacious enough to go through that patient journey, and so the vast majority of them are lost to follow-up. We also have competing economic imperatives in that, the sleep docs say to me, I don't want to refer a patient out for an oral appliance because I'll never see that patient again. The dentist will take them given an oral appliance and they'll fall out of care. Then the dentists say, well, I don't want to refer to a sleep physician because the sleep physician will take them, put them on CPAP, and I'll never see the patient again. So we needed to solve for that, and here's a schematic on that patient journey. I'm not going to go through it again for fear of everyone becoming insomniacs or, falling asleep. But the reality is that it is far too complex for a patient to follow through with that, and there are multiple bleed points. So what we've done is we've simplified the model. We don't need a full dental clinic to deliver these devices. We really only need a desktop scanner. And the desktop scanner you can see here, we've partnered with Carestream. We announced that agreement on Tuesday. We drop these scanners now into the sleep facility, whether they're a sleep physician's room, a sleep lab, or a durable medical equipment distributor. And so now the sleep physician can say, well, you can have CPAP, or we've got this great new treatment modality called an Oventus device, an O2 vent. If you like that, instead we can give you that, and we know it's going to work for you. Why don't you, if you want it, we'll pop next door and we'll get you scanned. So the sleep physician now writes a prescription, they go next door, staff member in the sleep clinic scans the patient, the data file gets sent to us in Brisbane, we design the device, we send it to a printer in Oregon, we're onboarding them this quarter, printed in Oregon, shipped back to the sleep facility in a week, and it gets delivered to the patient within the sleep facility. So now what we've done is we've taken our dental clinic and we've put it into the sleep facility digitally and virtually using one of these scanners. Minimal CapEx. And it leads to much greater revenue streams as well for the dentist and the sleep physician. So the agreements we announced on Tuesday, we have Carestream, the world's largest manufacturer and distributor of intraoral scanners. We have Virtuox, who are the largest supplier of diagnostics in the US, diagnosing 40,000 patients a month with a network of sleep physicians across 50 states, as well as an online platform that can deliver telemedicine, home sleep testing, and patient management anywhere in North America. Lion Dental are our billing solutions partners. They deal with the insurers on our behalf to ensure that the devices get paid for and the patients are pre-authorized before they get scanned. They also have an online appointment book module and a telemedicine module to deliver dental consults online within the sleep facilities if needed. So if we look at the sleep facility channel initially, and we've announced 3 material agreements across 15 sites in North America at the moment. We have a funnel, well over 200 sites. We're in negotiations or have issued contracts on in North America. First 15 have been finalised. We launched the first sites in Canada this week. And we're moving through Canada until Optima is available in the US, which we think will be in the next month or two, and then we'll start rolling these clinics out in the US. So in these facilities, we have the sleep physician there. They want to do an Oventus device. They can scan them on site. If they need a consultation with a dentist, Lion Dental module pops up and the dentist can consult online. The dentist can also attend on site if they wish. Either way, the patient will be scanned. We ship the device to the sleep facility, the patient receives it, and the patient's sleep apnea is managed by the sleep physician. And that's the key point here, is that dentists are not qualified to manage sleep apnea, and sleep physicians are not qualified to deliver oral appliances. And so we had to overcome that siloing of scope of practice laws. There are also sunshine kickback stark laws by state and federally in the US that we had to overcome to make this happen. So for instance, it's illegal for a sleep facility or a non-dentist to sell our device to a patient, have it paid for by the insurers, and then pay the dentist for the facility. But it's not illegal for the dentist to operate a mini clinic within the sleep facility and pay for services rendered. And so this is how we've structured this. And in doing so, we've made the business virtual. So we actually don't operate a business per se, and all of this workflow is done digitally using excess capacity in existing facilities. So it's very high margin for the sleep facility and for the dentist. In fact, they make 2 to 3 times the profit under this model than they make doing any other work that they do. In the dental clinic then, if a dentist, and the agreement with Carestream, they not only supply scanners to us, but they have an installed base of over 15,000 sites in North America that have a scanner in them and dentists scanning already. Those patients have millions of patients on their books, and we're working with Carestream to implement our workflow within these dental clinics. We're starting with 2 national dental networks initially, and we'll work through the market from there. And what happens there is, in the dental clinic, if a patient is identified, and dentists are actually very well positioned to identify sleep apnea, we're looking down the backs of people's throats all day. It's normally the hygienist who is trained to identify. They'll do a stop baying questionnaire. They'll screen them online on the portal that Virtuox have. It will be branded Oventus, but Virtuox are at the back end. They'll do a screening questionnaire. If they need a consultation with a sleep physician, that can be done in the dental clinic or even on the patient's home, on their iPhone, whatever. They book an appointment online. They have a consultation with a sleep physician, and then they are either written a prescription for a device or for a home sleep test. The home sleep test gets sent to the patient's home. The results are uploaded onto the portal. The dentist can see them, the sleep physician can see them. We can't see the results, but we can see they've had a sleep test. We know that this prescription has been written. And then the patient presents back at the sleep clinic and gets scanned with a CareStream scanner, which we also have access to see that the scan's taken place. And so now we have complete control over the patient journey within the dental setting, and we've turned every scanning site now into a mini and virtual dental sleep clinic. And so irrespective of where the patient presents on the treatment journey or where they present geographically or in whichever channel, we can manage the patient's sleep apnea to standard of care with the sleep physicians managing the OSA using a virtual business model. And so this is very exciting for us. We think it will lead to very rapid and large-scale adoption of the technology across US dental clinics. And the sleep facilities, we have pent-up demand with groups approaching us on a daily basis to be part of the lab-in-lab model. So we have a lab-in-lab model for the sleep facility and a lab-in-lab model for the dental clinic as well. And every one of these scenarios is aligned clinically. We're putting the patient first. We're treating them with the most effective treatment on the market, because remember, Oventus is 80% as effective as CPAP, but worn twice as much. So the effect on disease is in effect significantly greater than CPAP, and it's far greater than any other oral appliance. So we have the most effective treatment on market, and now we have the ability to deliver it anywhere, anytime, with the sleep physicians managing the sleep apnea according to scope of practice and standard of care. And I've just run through this, but this is a pictorial for you, and we're in the sleep channel here. That's not a comedian, that's a sleep physician apparently, with that hair. But irrespective of that, he's had a consultation with the patient. He said, look, you can have an Oventus device. The patient says, brilliant. Goes next door. One of the staff members scans the patient. And this is the sleep physician delivering the device. This could be the sleep physician or the dentist. The dentist is managing it virtually. He may have done a telemedicine consult on our platform. The dentist will be able to see the history that was taken by the sleep facility. They'll be able to look at the scans digitally to check for any issues. The patients will be, the dentist will no doubt want to meet the patients at some point in time. And the way we do that is we set up 1 day a week initially, and in our material contracts, there's a minimum of 20 devices per month are required. And so the dentist would attend 1 day a week and see 5 patients to deliver the device to them. It's probably 15 minutes of their time. On average, on those days, on minimum orders, the dentist would make $2,500 and the sleep facility $2,500. So that's 2 to 3 times the current average salary of a dentist, and 2 to 3 times what the sleep facility makes on CPAP. So all the interests are aligned in that scenario. In the dental clinic now, we have the reverse happening, where the telemedicine conferences with the sleep physician. The sleep physician is writing the prescription for a home sleep test or the Oventus device. And with our agreement with Virtuos, we're now working with them to educate their network of sleep physicians about Oventus and where it's indicated. And it's indicated in about 80% of patients. And so they'll start writing the prescriptions for these dental clinics for the Oventus device. The patient then gets scanned by the dentist and then follow up again with a home sleep test or telemedicine with the sleep physician. So we've now managed the patient's sleep apnea in the dental clinic as well. So what's driving adoption? Well, patients come first. We can deliver the best treatment option to the patients anywhere, anytime. And as importantly as that, from the stakeholders' point of view, is they're going to make a lot more money doing this than they are doing what they do now. And so we're also supporting the entire process from end to end, and we get visibility to ensure that where it's indicated that an Oventus device is delivered. So we've really aligned all of the interests of all the stakeholders and put the patient back at the centre of care. So in terms of the adoption of the lab-in-lab rollout, as we said, we have 15 sites contract. We're in negotiations or have issued contracts well north of 200, close to 300 sites. So we have a funnel of activity. We expect to see similar announcements coming through over the coming weeks and months. The first contracts that we've announced equate to around about $3.5 to $4 million per annum of annualized revenue on minimum orders. And our break even is 1,000 devices a month. We're at 300 a moment on those first 2 contracts. We expect to get well north of our break even point under contract by the back end of this year. There is obviously an implementation time frame and a lag on revenue, so we expect to be able to, on current resourcing, launch 1 site a week with a 60 to 90 day lead on revenue. We may decide to increase investment on that rollout as the agreements stack up, which would get us there faster. The minimum orders are conservative. One of those groups at the moment, even without Optima in market in the US, is triaging 20 patients a day onto a waiting list for Oventus technology. and that's half of our break even out of one agreement. So we think that the average orders will be well north of 20. Another site is seeing 600 CPAP failures a month. So we think that the revenue and the numbers could be greater than that. VirtuOx are diagnosing 40,000 patients a month, and we think as we start to work with the sleep physicians and the Carestream network, that we should be able to triage a significant number of those patients into Oventus technology as well. In terms of timelines, we have material contracts now in North America and Canada. We have Optima and XVent in market in Australia and Canada. We're aiming to have Optima in market in the US this quarter, XVent either late this year, early next year. And we'll continue to build on these contractual arrangements over the coming weeks, months and years. We actually have enormous demand for the technology and for the business model. To the extent that most of the people that we're in negotiations with, when we launched this, we only launched this program 6 weeks ago in Canada, and since then, as I said, we've had just under 300 sites that we've entered in negotiations or issued contracts on, and they continue to come in. So we think that it'll be a very significant revenue build in the back end of this calendar year and well into 2020. And these are the products that we were talking about. So we have everything available in Australia and Canada. Again, Optima this quarter in the US, XVent end of 2019, early 2020. But we have adoption ahead of approvals. And I think that's quite remarkable that we're signing material contracts ahead of the FDA clearance. And that, I think, is testament to the demand for the technology and the business model. Directors, we've got a great board. Mel's here with us today. Thank you, Mel. And Sue was with us yesterday. They're really an extension of the executive team. We very much appreciate their guidance and knowledge of the sector. Sharad Joshi has joined the board late last year as our US non-executive director. He has very extensive experience in networks and medical device, biotech, pharma in globally actually, but US based, and has worked in every level and style of business within the sector. Now we're very fortunate to have him on board as well. Neil and I as co-founders, and then Steve Denaro, our company secretary. So we've got a very strong board, and we're very appreciative of their support and guidance. Importantly, this whole lab-in-lab model was a concept that I had developed in my own mind in February last year. I just needed to figure out a way to do it, and I needed someone that had in-depth knowledge of the US sleep apnea market. And I was cyber stalking Robin, and she was cyber stalking me at the same time. She was interested in joining us, and we were certainly interested in her joining the team. And so fortunately, she came on board with us last year. Robin has 35 years experience in the sleep industry. She was one of the first employees at ResMed. She helped launch ResMed and F&P into the US market. She has run national sleep laboratory networks. She's run national durable medical equipment distributors selling CPAP. She's run national payment billing solutions companies. She's basically the queen of sleep. Within 2 months of bringing Robin on board, I had meetings with every major sleep network in North America, and every KOL had come on board to look at our data. And on the back of that, we've moved very quickly, I think, to get these guys involved. She brought with her team members that she's worked with at ResMed and F&P. We now have 11 staff members in the US, but we have reduced staff numbers by 30%. So I undertook a restructure last year when I came in as CEO. We outsourced all manufacturing. We stripped fixed costs, shut down 2 sites. And that allowed us to put what is a very effective team on the ground in the US to build this business model. Robin also helped us build, or she put together, our US advisory board. It just so happens that Lee Serkin is the Chief Medical Officer of VirtuOx, that Rick Bogan's the Chief Medical Officer of SleepMed. They're 2 of the largest groups in the country. Pedro Quartes is a boarded sleep dentist. Mark Rasmus has the largest network of dental sleep referrers in the country. Jerry Cram helped develop ProVent and did the clinicals on that. ProVent is a similar EPAP type valve for the nose, which unfortunately is not really accepted in market. And he also sees that Oventus technology has overcome all the limitations of ProVent, CPAP, surgery, and oral appliances. Mark Rasmus is on the board of Welltrinsic, which is the corporate arm of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. He's also the founder of Colorado Health Institute, Sleep Institute. Dan Brown and Myra Brown. Dan is an attorney, one of the most respected attorneys in the US in the sleep industry, and Myra is a reimbursement and regulatory consultant. So with these guys, it took us a year, but we had to work up the business model and the contractual arrangements to enable the lab-in-lab model, and these guys were central to that development. So between Robin, her team, between the board we have in Australia, between this advisory board here, we've managed to put together what I think is a remarkable opportunity for Oventus's investors, and also a great opportunity for the sleep community to bring more patients into care. This is a snapshot from earlier in the week. We have, I think the share price has climbed a little bit. I'm not sure where it is today, but I think it would be north of 31 cents. Cash on hand was $5 million end of last quarter. We have a burn of about $2 million a quarter. We have about $1.5 million coming in the second half of calendar 19 on R&D tax credit and sale of the other half of our printer, which we no longer need. So we have a reasonably strong balance sheet. We have very good revenue coming in at the back end of this year into 2020, we believe. In terms of the shareholders, I still retain 25%, and the other founders another 11%. Top 20 shareholders at 30%, with about a third in the retail market. Market cap at this point is probably closer to mid-40s, maybe 50 million. So why now? I think we've touched on this. We really are at an inflection point. Demand is exploding for the product and for the business model. We have got the best treatment solution on the market. It's a massive unmet need, billions of dollars and growing, double-digit compound annual growth. We have material contracts with minimum quotas and people lining up to be involved on that basis. I think we'll have tremendous revenue growth. We really are at that point where things are about to take off, and we're very excited about what lies ahead for Oventus and for all the stakeholders.